Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. Great to be with you this afternoon. We're going to be talking about land restoration. Who cares about land restoration? Yes. Okay. The reason why we're going to be talking about land restoration is about the fact that nearly all of us humans live on land. I was told I cannot say 100% because some people live in the water. Most of us live on land. 90% of what we eat comes from land. 90. Yeah? 50% of our GDP globally comes from activities based on land, so it matters. And yet, 1/3 of land at the global scale is threatened by desertification. 1/3. Most of it is degraded, and already 3 billion people are suffering from land degradation. So if we care about land for our food, our feed, our fibers, how we get our clothing and our fuels, we need to restore land. So that's what we're going to be talking about, okay? And for this, I have brilliant people who are going to come with me. 2 series of conversation, a lot of people to speak in a short amount of time. We'll do our best, but that's what's going to happen now. And while they come on stage, we're going to play a little video to give you some context. Yeah? Yeah? Okay, thank you. Come on stage, please.
Our land, the foundation of life itself, the source of fresh water, crops, and raw materials, the lifeline of forests, rangelands, wetlands, and other vital habitats. Yet beneath our feet, a crisis unfolds. Land degradation is affecting every corner of the planet, causing biodiversity loss, reduced water quality, food insecurity, and forced migration. 40% of the world's land is already degraded, impacting 3.2 billion people. That's nearly half of humanity. Deforestation, overgrazing, unsustainable agriculture, industrial practices. We are pushing our land to the brink, and it is our future that hangs in the balance. We need to act now to reverse it. The world needs to restore 1.5 billion hectares of degraded land by 2030. Around the world, a growing movement is already starting. From Africa's Great Green Wall, working to restore 100 million hectares of land south of the Sahara, to the Middle East Green Initiative, planting 50 billion trees across Asia and Africa, and the Bond Challenge, aiming for 350 million hectares restored by 2030. Global initiatives are underway, but greater action is needed. Countries must establish restoration targets, and the private sector needs to increase its participation, recognizing that half of global GDP depends on natural capital. At UNCCD COP16, Saudi Arabia played a pivotal role in bringing global attention to land degradation, emphasizing its impact across all regions. The kingdom also highlighted the interlinkages between soil health, water and food security, and climate resilience, framing land degradation as a universal concern beyond dry climates. The Riyadh Action Agenda introduced key initiatives to strengthen global action, including the Sustainable Land Fund, to scale private sector investment in land restoration. For the first time, the role of business was brought to the forefront, with a dedicated forum uniting governments, companies, and civil society to drive sustainable land, soil, and water management. These outcomes were reinforced in the Riyadh Political Declaration, where countries committed to rehabilitate up to 1.5 billion hectares of degraded land by 2030. Lasting change requires sustained investment. We have the solutions to achieve land degradation neutrality. It's now time to use them for our land, for our future, for every life that hangs in the balance.
Okay. So these are big numbers we are hearing, restoring 1.5 billion hectares, right? That's not a small task and small feat. Thanks for joining us. Dr. Osama, you are the Deputy Minister for the Environment of Saudi Arabia. So when we talk about arid land this is what you know. Desertification and desert, this is also what your country has to face and the challenge that they have to face when it comes to restoration. In 2021, you launched the Saudi Arabia Green Initiative that then got transformed into the Middle East Green Initiative. Can you tell us what this is about? How do you turn deserts into regenerated land? And give us a concrete example of what that looks like.
Thank you. Yes, I think first of all, we have to realize the severity of the challenge.
Yep.
Yes, we have to restore 1.5 billion hectares, but if we don't do that, we will have around 6 billion hectares of degraded land in 2050.
Yep.
And this is more than double the land we have degraded in the last 500 years. So we are degraded land at an alarming rate of about 100 million hectares per year. And this degradation comes from deforestation, illegal logging, overgrazing, improper agriculture practices, mining, the building materials, improper road design, salination of soil. So we are degrading lands in various ways at a very high rate. So land degradation is not only in arid areas like Saudi Arabia. It's global. And we have to act globally. In Saudi Arabia, of course, we are planning to restore 40 million hectares. And of course, it is much harder in Saudi Arabia because it is very arid.
Yes.
So we really put some principles. First of all, it has to be local species, local plant species, because it is adapted to local harsh environment. It has to be with renewable water resources. It has to be sustainable. And we have to also maintain ecological balance. And it shouldn't be a government only work. It should be a community, all communities. So by today now, we have planted about 140 million hectares. It's not only plantation, 140 million trees, 140 million trees. We are involving the private sector. About 50% of this is supported by private sector. We are involving NGOs. And we also focusing on controlling degrading practices. So we stopped illegal logging. We are trying to organize grazing, so we stop overgrazing. Now we are putting environmental standards for mining, trying to cut pollution and all others. So you cannot restore land and continue to degrade it by bad practices. So you have to restore it sustainably and collectively, but also you have to look at what are the industries and practices that degrade land and address that. Otherwise, the objective will not be achieved.
So we'll come back to that, the fact that we need to involve all the stakeholders and it cannot be a government action alone. But still, in your capacity as a representative for the government, you also held COP16 last year, and you still have the presidency of COP16, so it's the Conference on the Party on Desertification. What were the main achievement of that COP to do exactly just that, beyond just being, talk and paper at an international level? What were the concrete advances?
I think the first one is raising global awareness about land.
Yes.
So we really invested a lot into engaging conversation of many stakeholders before the COP. Actually, we worked with the United Nations and many other countries to issue a resolution on land degradation in UNIA 6 in Kenya in March 2024. And also we looked for involving innovation and private sector and the civil society. So we had decisions on the indigenous people. For the first time, we have now a caucus for indigenous people. We have decisions on agriculture. The first time, we have resolutions on rangelands. Rangelands is 75% of the land degradation happens in rangelands. We have actually covered a big milestone in reaching a decision on drought. And we announced the Riyadh initiative, global initiative on drought resilience, because drought impacts about 1/3 of humanity.
Yeah.
And we have launched this major initiative. We launched Business for Land,
Okay.
and we launched Riyadh Action Agenda. By the end of the COP, we had about 40 entities announce initiative, because we already have targets in COP 15, COP 14, COP 13. But what we lack is the business community engagement. We lacked projects and initiatives on the ground.
Yes.
And this is what we tried to do in Riyadh, by having more involvement, more initiatives on the ground. And I'm glad to announce that by end of December, we had like 40 initiatives, and my colleagues telling me now the number has increased.
Okay, because it's true that people tend to focus on climate, on biodiversity, but land and desertification is often the poor parent of this trinity of environmental treaties that were adopted in '92. So thanks for that. Minister Salden, welcome. You are the Minister for the Environment and Climate Change of Mongolia.
Yes.
Mongolia also face land degradation of a different nature.
Yes.
Obviously, it's not the same context. Can you tell us what are the key initiatives you are taking at the country level to really restore land and stop degradation from your perspective?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Mongolia is located in Central Asia. Territory is 1.5 million square kilometer.
Yeah.
Means 1 square kilometer per 2 person. This is, we have very big territory, but our land is we have dry land.
Yeah.
And more than 76% of our whole territory now under desertification.
Yep.
Yes, it's the big.
And it's mostly land for pasture that
yes,
you have in
pasture.
Mongolia, right?
Yes, and
Yeah.
land degradation. And more than around 300,000 herders in Mongolia care for 57 million livestock.
Yeah, that's it.
Yes, it's quite the big problem. And 3.4 million Mongolian depends on the food and the income and daily needs depends on the these herders'
Yes.
activities. Yes, and we face also when the land degrades, it impacts more than just the environment. Also, it threatens food security.
That's right.
Reduces access to water, and weakens on livelihoods and
Yeah.
everything.
And you told me when we were preparing that in terms of stopping that degradation and
Yes.
restoring, women in particular
Yeah.
were playing a key role. And this is where you also put some investment nationally,
Yes,
correct?
and one of our largest efforts is the initiation of initiative 1 billion trees campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah, it focuses on reforestation, restoring degraded land.
Yeah.
And we planted 80 million plants for 10,000 hectares.
Yeah.
Yeah, it also help carbon sequestration,
Okay.
etc. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. So we're talking a lot about trees, Florent, and that's also where you come in, yet for another region and part of the world. You are the CEO of Global Forest Regeneration, so that's what you do. You focus on degraded lands that have a forest cover, or that had a forest cover, from the Andes all the way to Patagonia in Latin America. So can you tell us, in that context, how you prevent that degradation and work on restoring? What is it that you do? Is it just about planting trees?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Great. So get it out of the way. I'm French. I live in Peru. I live in the Andes. I work in the Andes. We have
Bring it closer to your mouth, Florent.
we have launched an initiative called Acción Andina 6 years ago that is about restoring high Andean ecosystem. So what's happening in the Andes is the glaciers are melting. Water security is becoming a huge issue. The glaciers, I'm very sorry to say, will be gone. By 2050, almost 70%. And so the only natural substitute to the water holding capacity of those glaciers will be forest and ecosystems in the highland holding water in the altitudes. Now, communities realize that at first, right? Lack of water, missed crops, delayed rains, and they're coming together to actually bring them back. Planting trees and reforestation actually makes a whole lot of sense in the Andes. There is a lot of natural regeneration, but to accelerate this natural process that in high altitudes, we're talking 3,500 to 5,500 meters in altitude, that takes a long time.
Yeah.
The core of what we do, which is my main message, is we're working really at the grassroots level. And how? We are reviving ancestral principles of the communities, of the deep culture of the Andean people, to be able to unite the people and mobilize en masse the people of the high Andes. We started 6 years ago with a few dozen people. We have over 40,000 people already actively involved, have planted 12 million trees so far, but this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
If we're really looking at long-term restoration, this is a multi-generational effort. It doesn't go fast. We talk about solutions. These solutions have to be in the long term, multiple generation. We think of Acción Andina as a 100-year program, just putting that into perspective.
And earlier, Mr. Deputy Minister spoke about the importance of engaging the private sector, right? So you also make that pitch. Can you give us the business case for that engagement in your particular context? And how do you involve local community in that? Because that's a complexity, right? We need to bring the private sector, but at the same time, we need to respect indigenous practices and engage them. How do you make that pitch?
So first of all, I don't think I need to do a business case. The reason is the companies are actually coming to us. Why? They're realizing that water security will put a halt to their economic activities.
Yeah.
The companies are realizing that. They are the ones contacting us saying, nobody is actually doing anything at scale. We need to actually take that front. And the only solutions that I find is local and indigenous communities doing restoration projects. So this is actually quite a beautiful thing. And not only direct water-dependent industries such as agriculture or water utilities. We actually have banks and insurance companies coming to us at the moment saying, if the companies that I'm lending money to are running out of water, they'll be in trouble. That will affect my business case. Yeah. And so that brings about new types of partnerships. The hard work is really, as you mentioned, connecting the both, connecting the insurance and financial markets to local community initiative. And that middle piece is a very technical one, but is a crucial one. And allow me to say one more thing. Quite often, so there's two extremes with a whole lot of respect. Either you have huge initiatives promoted by global treaties and government, but seldom, it is very hard to get them on the ground in realities.
Right.
Or you have amazing small initiatives in every community, but it's very hard to get them scaled up in an entire region. So we have to work together to figure out, including the businesses, including the ministries of each and every country, to actually make that work. And that's the challenge we're facing.
Dr. Osama, I see you nodding on that. And as you said, as part of COP16, the engagement of the private sector is that was one of your strong push for the first time, as you mentioned. They came to the COP. We see them all over on climate. We don't see them too much on what's the main challenge that you're facing in terms of that engagement?
I think realizing the impact. What has been mentioned, the business community came when they realized their business at risk. So they came and they realized this engagement is to secure their business. Now the global business doesn't see the risk of not engaging. Still we are borrowing from land and we are not realizing that this is not sustainable. As soon as, of course, many times it's a local condition. The local business realizing that we need to preserve the land, otherwise we will lose the business opportunity. But we don't have this global outlook. For example, the carbon credit. This is as a financial model, it has also pushed the action on climate very much because we have a price on carbon and we have a trading mechanism and the carbon credits. And So we need something similar.
Now we have
for
the nature
land.
credit, and you would advocate
Exactly.
to have some kind of a land restoration
Land,
credit?
I think, I mean, we need to integrate it, yeah.
D'accord.
So we need, I think we need to have the economic model. We need to have the financial institutions. For example, in the nature-based solutions now, we out of $540 billion that was required, only 165 was availed, and mostly coming from governments. The business contribution is around 5%. So in nature-based, I think the business now is contributing big time in the electric vehicle, into the renewable energy, but they are not really participating in the nature-based solutions.
Right, yep.
Because there is no, the business models are not there.
Are not there. Minister Salden, you will take over the presidency. Mongolia will take over the presidency of this convention of the party, the big gathering of governments on desertification and to address land degradation next year.
Yeah.
How will you keep the momentum on that important topic, despite the, let's say, turbulent geopolitical context where the priorities are different? What is your main vision for COP17 in Mongolia next year?
Next year, in August, we are hosting COP17. And it is not just organize big event or big conference.
Yeah.
We'd like to lead in a movement to combat desertification. And we, together we will, UNCCD, we will champion the rangeland and rangeland flagship initiative.
Yeah.
Yes, and this will be global coalition on rangelands and pastoralists. Yeah, and this will be together voices from all over the country to coordinate, to change opinions, to change experience, invest in sustainability in management. And our key priorities is the first, achieving land degradation neutrality. The second is strengthening drought resilience.
Drought resilience.
Yeah, drought resilience and the early warning system. And the third, promoting sustainable rangeland and dryland management. Also, bridging traditional and scientific knowledge. Because Mongolian people, for many years, for many decades, we lived in nomadic lifestyle,
Yes, yeah.
nomadic economy. That's why we'd like to mix with scientific knowledge and to improve land
regeneration.
land
Can you give us
degradation.
a concrete example from Mongolia about what that looks like? You say you have mostly nomadic pastoralists taking care of herds. Can you give us an illustration of what you did in Mongolia to bridge these indigenous practices with the science? Tell me what it looks like in Mongolia.
Yeah, but this is the big problem
Yeah.
because it is very difficult to change people's mind because I mentioned before that only 300,000 herders growing 75 million cattle.
Yeah.
Means we are going just after quantity.
Yes.
We need to think on the quality. Yes, we'd like to we need to transfer on using knowledge, new technology. Yeah, but this we can change it, but it's difficult to change the mind. That's why we'd like to organize this coalition.
Yes.
On rangeland and together decide all these problems.
Yeah, I think we all need to change our mindset on that topic. I don't think it's only locally, but in this tricky context, Florent, what makes you hopeful? Again, the numbers are mind-blowing, right? If we need to restore 1.5 billion hectares, what makes you the most excited and the most hopeful in terms of achieving that big goal?
We will not achieve those numbers if we don't fundamentally understand that land restoration happens at the community level. If the people are not involved, at the people really living on the land for generations past and in the future are not driving that restoration, it will simply not happen. And so for the global treaties, and almost my invitation and my wish to the COP processes, how do we break this down?
You can make your pitch. They're here.
How could
the current presidency, the next presidency, what would be your hope and your ask to governments?
I would like to see in Mongolia, your herders community, the nomads coming, sharing their ancestral culture, sharing how they have managed the lands sustainably for thousands of years.
Yep.
And what can we learn from this? Quite often, we think of solutions, and I'm fully in line with that. But the solutions are often not the 2-year business solution immediate. These solutions have to be long-term, multiple generations, and really be fundamentally based on the local culture, right? Every solution that we try to bring in from the outside will never work. And so my invitation to the global treaties, which we love attending and are supporting that, is really to think simply, listen to the local people everywhere in the world, and it's about dignity, it's about respect, it's about justice, and if we can embed this at the center, at the core of these processes, while recognizing the role of governments, the role of business into supporting that, I think we will go a long way.
Dr. Osama, so that's his speech to you. This is also, you already engaged local communities and actors at the COP16. From your perspective, as you are going to be ready to hand over the presidency to Mongolia, what are you the proudest of in terms of the achievement that you would have made and you will make through your presidency to advance that huge agenda?
I think the participation.
Right.
The participation has been huge.
It was.
We have like 100,000 attendance, 600 sessions, and we have the first time we have financial announcement by financial institutions of major investments. So this is really that the various stakeholders are hearing the message and starting to come. And I think I'm very proud about the decision on indigenous people.
Yeah.
It's the first time now we have the indigenous people caucus as a pillar of the negotiation, and I'm very proud of that. We also have the women and youth caucus, and we have the first time a decision on agricultural land, and I think
which is a huge part of the problem.
It is huge, and I think one thing very beautiful, and we hear the Andrea, the Under Secretary of the agreement, she said always in the negotiation we start with ambitious text. As with negotiation, we bring down the ambition to satisfy this.
Right.
Always, we start high and then we end up agreeing on the law. For the agriculture and the rangeland, we started low and we end up high because there is this atmosphere in the negotiation rooms that land is very important.
It is.
And the stakeholders came and we end up with decisions on agriculture, on rangelands, and I think COP17 is very important to keep the momentum.
That's right.
And we carry the engagement. We have the action agenda, the business for land, which is now for the first time we have the business for land initiative. We have, I think, thousands of businesses have a climate agenda.
Yeah.
And now we'd like to have land and biodiversity with the climate as well. So I think we are very proud. We made a huge step, but we need to continue with COP17.
We need to continue. And so, Minister Saldon, you have the last short word. All eyes are on you for that next stage of bringing this international negotiation. What would make you the proudest during your presidency in terms of achievements?
Because Mongolian people has a huge knowledge.
They do have,
Yes, many decades we use the nomadic lifestyle, and we can we know very well how to protect your land. But without the international support, without
Coalitions of the willing, as you said,
coalition, now it's impossible because already 76% is now under desertification. And that's why it is not the problem of only Mongolia, it's the problem of the region and a problem of the
Well, for all of us.
Yes, that's why we'd like to combine all the efforts.
Yes.
Yeah, and to ask all countries to
join. So it's a big
join
call to action.
Our
Yeah.
coalition.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Minister. Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Florent, the non-minister, but minister-to-be, maybe, for sharing this experience and your leadership with us. Join me in applauding them while I bring the next round of speakers in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
That way for the picture. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so it was our opening, big context, big treaty, big people, big objective. Now we're going to move to the ground with my next 4 speakers. Come on in, Marjolein, Willem, Craig. Craig is here, Craig. D'accord, et je dois changer de chaise. Hop. And I sit here. Oh, okay. And I need my, hey, Craig. So I'm now a little bit more relaxed, right? Because the ministers have gone. Yes. Hi. Oh. Okay. So each one of you, they're all great. You see their bio on the website. They're all fabulous people. They're staying here for the rest of the day. You can come get them. We're going to talk about your solutions, the complexity in scaling them, and then what can we do so that things don't disappear after a couple years, as we just heard is one of the main challenges. So we're talking big numbers. We start with you, Marjolein, so you're the CEO of Justdiggit. So tell us, what do you do concretely to address this important topic? Yeah, go for it. And give us a very concrete example while you do that as well, just so that we can picture it in our head.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm working for Justdiggit. Justdiggit is an organization that is aiming at large-scale landscape restoration in sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah.
So what we do is, together with local partners, local implementing partners and communities, both pastoralists and farming communities, restore their lands, their degraded lands. Because I think in the previous session you have heard that a lot of land in Africa, at 65% of the land is degraded. So there is a huge opportunity to restore that. And we work with very low-tech, low-cost interventions that are highly scalable. So we make sure that we inspire first communities, because when we talk about landscape restoration, we also talk about not only talk about restoring land, but also about restoring mindsets, about really inspiring people, giving them hope again, showing that restoration is possible. I think there it all starts. And then from there on, there is a lot of education. There are train-the-trainer models that we implement together with local organizations. And for example, we use rainwater harvesting techniques. People that know Justdiggit, we're quite well known for digging the half-moon-shaped buns, the water buns. It's a rainwater harvesting technique. When it rains, the topsoil of the land is most of the time so degraded that when it rains, you have only floods. So when you open up the top layer, water can infiltrate the soil again, and then the natural seeds that are still in there sprout or reseed with seeds that we grow in women-empowered grass seed bank programs. But another very scalable technique is farmer-managed natural regeneration. And we do that in, for example, central Tanzania. We are working there with big communities, in total with 200,000 farmers and their families, bringing back trees on farmland. And by bringing back trees on farmlands, you have triple profits. You have, like, of course, the grass, the trees are coming back. You restore the water in the soil, so the soil is improving. And you also make the land more resilient for climate change.
Yeah.
So,
And
that's
so
really
what you
important.
explain is that these techniques are also local techniques that have been used, that have had
Yeah.
the proof made over the years, and that you, in a way, are reintroducing them in the different practices.
Exactly. It's very, for us, it's essential, it's crucial to work with local knowledge.
That's what we heard before.
Yeah, and that's and with local communities, because when it's not local based, local owned, I don't think it can be sustainable in a way.
Thank you. Let me turn to you then, Ineke. So you work with Rabobank. So you're the banker in that panel, sort of. Okay, it's okay because we heard the big call to action for finance, insurance, and companies in general. So tell us about where you come in that land restoration as a banker developing financial tools to accelerate that change.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, by the way, in this wonderful venue.
Isn't it
It's
nice?
so nice.
Yeah.
So I work for a company called Smallholder Agroforestry Finance. I'll call it SAF or SAF from
Yep.
now on. So it's a spin-out, basically, of Rabobank, which is the banking entity. What we aim to do is finance similar projects like Justdiggit, where we help small-scale farmers to plant trees intercropping with their current cash crop. So it could be maize, cocoa that they have right now, and they plant additional trees, which have all the benefits that you just provided. What we've seen is that initially we looked at grant funding for these type of projects, and that's fantastic, but you don't...
Meanings money given by
Donors
philanthropy.
never have to be repaid
Or, yeah.
by, for instance, USAID or Bezos Earth
Or not
Fund,
anymore,
that type
but,
of
yeah,
exactly.
traditional
I'll
donors,
come
yeah.
to that later. So we realized that this is actually quite hard to match exactly with the project, or it's not available when you need it. So we said, why don't we set up a blended finance structure, meaning we'll have a bit of grants, but that then de-risks, so it absorbs any first losses that may occur in the future, so other financiers feel comfortable to step in. So we're setting up a fund-like structure that will then lend to these projects so they can start training the farmers, planting the trees. And actually, we're using the carbon market as a means to an end. So we don't think carbon markets in itself are so fantastic, but you could use it as a means to repay the loans. So we give the loans, trees are planted, Acorn, a Rabobank entity, will then measure based on satellite footage how much the trees grow. They can also calculate how much carbon is sequestered in those trees. And then for each ton of carbon, they issue 1 carbon credit that is sold by companies that are willing to first reduce their footprint. And this is important. They shouldn't just buy those credits and continue whatever they're doing. They should first reduce, and on top of that, buy these credits. And then with the money from these carbon credits, we pay the project implementation. We pay the farmers for their efforts, so they have additional income, which helps for their personal livelihoods, and we use a portion to repay the loan that we gave in the beginning. Once the loan is fully repaid, that portion that used to be for interest and repayment will go to the farmers.
Did you all get that? She's good, huh? Right. Explain this because it's complex, huh? It's a lot of terms. Okay.
I'll try to make it
Yeah,
simple and
thank
not
you.
banker-like.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, Craig, you next. So you work with the World Resources Institute, and there the part of that problem that you're focusing on has to do with data, right? So can you tell us what it is that you're trying to engineer there to try and help develop the techniques that we just heard about?
Yeah, sure. So if I start to explain the Land and Carbon Lab at the World Resources Institute, then I'll start talking about breakthroughs in Earth monitoring. And I'll talk about the fact that most monitoring misses large parts of our planet. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to create the foundational research which allows us to monitor grasslands, figure out where the expansion of agriculture is going. We're trying to look at how ecosystems are being converted and see that on a day after it happens. And one of the key research areas that we're working on is how do you monitor restoration projects at scale in the first 2 years?
And that's super hard because as much as it's easy to monitor what's happening with forest cover because they're big and we can see them, restoration in the first 2 years is just small things.
That's right. Things don't grow very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're effectively actually doing is trying to scale trust.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is like our restoration teams work with people that are interested in investing in restoration projects. And one of the first questions they'll ask us is, okay, how do I independently verify that the investments I'm making are leading to some form of impact?
To complement what Ineke is doing.
Exactly right. And so this is a really hard problem to solve at scale. So what we do is we use very high resolution satellite imagery and combine it with technologies that companies, and we're working with companies like Meta, that they use to detect like faces in photos or change 2D imagery to 3D imagery. And we turn that on the satellite data, and which allows us to do things like count every single tree on the planet and measure the height of all tree canopies at a 1 meter resolution on the planet at incredible accuracy. And what that allows us to do, it gives us this kind of level of verification in combination with like, locally designed, locally monitored products, which gives you that element of trust between the finance and the restoration projects. And that's kind of like the core of what we try and do. We try and make it open and freely available so we can kind of raise up that level of monitoring. So, you know, when we're scaling to billions of hectares, we have the technology and the infrastructure that's capable of actually monitoring it.
Yeah. Thanks, Craig. So for all of you interested in the data part of the picture, you come to Craig. Everything he does is open source, so he's your person to come to after that panel. Now, Willem, so these are parts of that huge solution, and you are the founder of Commonland, and your approach is to take a systems approach to that problem and try to connect the dots between everything that we've heard up to now, correct? So tell us, how do you do that? Because that sounds complex to me.
It is complex. Yes, I'm indeed the founder of Commonland, and Commonland was founded in 2013 based on an approach to bring, let's say, the scientific part of social innovation and ecological restoration together at the landscape scale. So we developed a framework called the 4 returns framework. So each
The 4 returns?
The 4 returns framework.
Yeah.
So each degraded landscape is characterized by 4 losses.
Yeah.
A loss of purpose, a loss of community, a loss of biodiversity, and a loss of finance, economics. That means that at the restored landscape, you need to return inspiration, ROI. You need to return community, social returns, biodiversity or natural returns. And then the sustainable financial returns will come automatically. It's not easy.
Is that
Because
right,
you
Ineke?
need to think in zoning.
She's
And you need to
nodding,
understand,
but,
we'll come back to that. You
Okay.
need to understand what the landscape is, and that's why we have we made this explicit combination of 3 zones. A natural zone, a combined zone where you combine biodiversity and productivity, and an economic zone which is basically hard infrastructure and industry and cities and urban areas and roads and whatever. So that means that you need to look from infrastructural angle towards a landscape.
Yeah.
It's a green industrial, and let's say it's an upcoming holistic landscape restoration industry that we foresee. And of course you need time. So we need to stop thinking in projects. We need to think in processes of at least a few decades, because this takes
We
time.
heard 100 years earlier, yeah.
100 years is
It's
super.
good.
We say minimum 20 years, because for people to think in 100 years is quite tough.
Yeah.
But minimum 20 years is something that people, especially pension funds and some large investors, will understand. So what we did is we implemented projects since 2013 using this framework, whether in 5 countries, large areas above 100,000 to 1 million hectares.
Yeah,
so
that's
let's say the size from Luxembourg to the size of a quarter of the Netherlands. And,
These are still small
and that's still small, but it's big for
kidding.
people if you live there.
Right.
And what we now see is that the narrative, because you can measure it in generic KPIs indicators as well as specific ones, that you see that this process of social innovation and ecological restoration, the technicalities, combined, that it is accepted and people buy into it. People who live there.
Yeah.
Because we first need to have people who, this is about stakeholder management. People need to understand that they can work towards beautifying their own countryside. So the next step is now that we are now working in more than 20 countries.
Yeah.
The next step is that people increasingly see, and especially the business people and the financiers, see that we need to work towards a landscape finance assessment, and from there towards a landscape, and that's a part of Ineke, a landscape finance blended fund. Just one example, if you look at the Valencia disaster in October last year in Spain, 600,000 hectares where it was a water catchment of 600,000 hectares. 30,000 hectares were affected. More than 200 people died.
Yeah.
60,000 houses were damaged. The cost was 14 billion euros. Only one water catchment in Spain because of a heavy weather event combined with landscape degradation over decades and sometimes centuries. So we are talking about a billion-dollar industry. The insurance companies in Spain needed to pay out 3.9 billion euros, the biggest amount ever in Spain. They set up a fund for 14 billion euros, which was never done before in a country like Spain. And this is only one water catchment in the Iberian Peninsula. They have hundreds. In the Mediterranean, they have hundreds. So what does it mean? We need to think from an industrial angle where you need to use two words, holistic, because this is about bottom-up and combining top-down, and long-term. And that also makes the difficult issue with the financiers that they need to buy into this long-term from a risk perspective. And yeah, I think that will come. The more heavy weather events we have, like in Los Angeles, and especially in the Western world, because there's insurance companies behind it. But of course, this is happening everywhere.
But our budget in most of our countries, you mentioned Spain, are acted on and voted annually, right?
Yeah.
Not for 20 years, unless it's about infrastructure, unless it's about roads, unless it's about bridges and whatnot.
But the real infrastructure are rivers, are landscapes, is the ecology. The ecology should drive the economy, not the other way around. And this is the way how to make it practical.
So that's what we need to change. We need to consider this project as we've been
exactly. And what we see is that we have developed a kind of motor of this landscape industry that people understand bottom up and increasingly also top down, because governments need to buy into this, of course.
Marjolein, at your level, because again, we're talking about scaling, that's the title of this conversation. What's the main challenges that you are facing in terms of scaling your model? And I just want to take my friend out there that I'm not having a counter. I can go on for an hour. It's fine with me, but I don't have countdown. So I'm taking ownership of this stage while you figure it out. Marjolein, we have all our time.
I have time, so that's nice. No, and time is exactly, I think, the biggest challenge. When we're talking about landscape restoration, about degradation, we see that, we're losing lots of land, lots of hectares of land every day. So we really have to scale up fast. I think that is our biggest challenge. But how to do that? And then, of course, finance also comes in. So I think looking at where we are standing now, we know what works, we know what the interventions are, we know the communities that can do it, the communities that can restore their own lands. We have the techniques that are there, we have the knowledge, but we have to bridge the gap between the communities and the two. And that is funding for a big part.
So it's all come down to the money, which I don't know. I mean, I think there is obviously this change of mindset that needs to operate so that we consider ecosystem and landscape as the basis of what we do and not on the... So obviously that's the main shift that we need. And still, while this is happening, the funding aspect is critical, right? So you showed us that financial engineering you're putting together, but how do you scale this?
Good question. We talked a little in advance with Willem, so I agree with his point. You need patient capital. You need people...
What does that mean?
So at least 15 years in our case. So I agree with your 20. So you need people that are willing to commit to 20. And we're actually at an interesting crossroads. And I'm going to steal your comment, Willem, so all kudos to Willem. It's an interesting way. So one, you need to see, is there value in this? So we're using, for instance, the carbon credit as a value in this project, which makes it interesting for financiers because they get repaid. There's a repayment mechanism based on the carbon credit. You can do that with other things too. So that is the carrot. That is what the investors typically like. You get your money back, you make a bit of interest on it. But then there's also the stick. You mentioned insurance companies had to pay out millions.
Yep.
And typically, the investors that have a long-term vision are investors like institutional investors like pension funds, insurance companies.
Reinsurance, maybe.
And so reinsurance, pension funds, and insurance companies, what do? They typically invest in portfolios of shares, and that value is at risk now because resources are at risk and the companies are at risk. So that could be the stick. to drive them towards this. And if you then can find a way to build in a repayment mechanism, then that's, I think, the way to generate that patient capital. But yeah, the mindset needs to be open for it. People need to be okay with the 15-year commitment.
Does that sound feasible to you?
I think this century it will come, so I'm realistic, because the more heavy weather events we will get, especially in the Western world, where people are insured, the money will finally find its way. I'm a bit hesitant and reluctant about the, let's say, the more developing world, because people are not insured.
Yes.
And that, so if these things happen in Pakistan or Ethiopia, you know, it will be more difficult. And so I hope at a certain moment that, especially through long-term commitment of governments with banks, with insurance companies, and especially beverage, ag, and governments that really understand these issues, like we heard from Saudi Arabia before, that they will set up a long-term blended funds at landscape level to make this possible.
Something to bring to the Mongolia COP jointly after that. When we catch them, I think they're gone. Craig, for this to work, if it's based on carbon credit or biodiversity credit, or we've heard before maybe land regeneration credits, we're going to need the data, all right? So the data is key as part of that solution.
That's right.
What's the main challenge you are facing in the type of model you're building? Same thing, to bring them at this global level, and then for people to know how to use it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I guess there's a number of big challenges and small challenges, and I'll give you one tiny challenge first. We've got all this wonderful modeling. We've got all this fantastic ability to figure out what's happening on the planet. What we don't actually have very much of is the locations of where restoration is happening. What I would call as polygons, right? Just the delineation of the places where things are happening. And so if you have that, then it's possible to monitor. If you don't have that, you tend to get it wrong. And so at the very basic stage, a very small stage, the more polygons on a map, the better. So that's one thing. The other thing is there's a huge amount of investment currently going into startups and nature tech startups to provide services to the private market to be able to do this type of restoration monitoring. The problem with that, they're starting from a point of a very low level of like scientific and technical discovery. And so what's happening is, you know, tens of millions are going into these startups, great, but they're having to They have to reinvent their research that hasn't been done yet, and each has to do that on their own. And so, like, one of the reasons we exist is to try and raise up that level to the point where those startups don't have to do that, and they can focus on building the products which are useful for the market, you see? So that if there's a way of, like, reorienting some finance to the fundamental research, then I think we actually raise up everything else.
Okay, but the funds that you're getting, because it's funded, your lab is funded by Bezos Earth, right?
That's right, yeah.
That can provide that, hopefully. I mean, if billionaires cannot do that, then who's going to do it now,
that's right, yeah. That's
they can provide that funding for the fundamental research that then can allow startups to connect and piggyback,
that's
right?
Correct,
So that's the model. Okay, so I have the prompter. We don't have much time left. And so there is one point actually I wanted to raise with you, because we're all sitting here talking about land regeneration in a part of the world that we're not from, right? And so we heard that one of the key challenge that we're all facing is to work with local communities in all these projects. So can you tell me what is the key principle or aspect of engaging with community that you would like to see more of?
So we work closely with Acorn, and they work with local implementation partners.
So your partners are?
Yeah. So for me, key in these local implementations are working with project councils. So, for instance, the local village chief is in that council. The farmers are represented. There are proper grievance mechanisms also for if something is not going according to plan. But I think that involvement is key. And also, I think we heard Minister Dr. Osama say it's native species, so really cater to the local needs and what is common practice in those countries.
If I turn to you, Marjolein, it's part of your business model to have this approach, right?
Yes, I think it's essential. It's key. Otherwise, we can't do it. So we design our programs together with local partners that are really embedded in the communities we're working in. And we also see that that is the only way it's adopted, but it's also sustainable because it should be locally owned, locally led. If that's not the case, then yeah, when the project stops or when the 3-year time of hardcore implementation support is over, then there is no project anymore. So it's really embedded in the communities, and I think that also makes it strong. That it's making use of traditional knowledge of techniques that are practiced. Sometimes it's more forgotten knowledge that will revive when people are seeing, for example, rotational grazing. What the Maasai, we're working with a lot with Maasai communities in the southern part of Kenya and northern Tanzania. But they always were tracking around, and because of now different structures, they're staying in the same village, which causes degradation of land, overgrazing. But when you bring back together with the communities, you restore spots of land and you start a rotational grazing management system, then you kind of I think relate to their traditional knowledge and the way they always lived. So you implement old techniques in a new setting.
Willem, you have the last word with a word of wisdom, as you've been in that space for the longest, probably out of all of us.
Now, maybe to also to build upon what Marjolein said is what we see is pride. That's number one. The second one is you need to understand their spiritual connection with the land. And even, everyone has that. That means a sense of belonging, listening very carefully, using the knowledge that is already there, and then, let's say, help with the right technologies or whatever and connections to make it happen. But pride and proudness is super important. We call that the return of inspiration. It's one of our first, let's say, indicator. If you don't have that and don't follow, let's say, the indicators that are under the return of inspiration, so you need to maximize ROI before you start to talk about the other things.
Yeah, and I think
it works.
That's what all of us need to do, and that the pitch you've been making.
Yeah.
We are stopping. Thank you very much for your contribution, Ineke, Craig, Willem, and Marjolein. Thank you very much.